AOC, AOC did a disastrous live stream. And it had to do with anti-Semitism, Zionism, what's going on in Israel, and how to be an ally. An ally. Oh, I just want to be an ally. Well, here's AOC speaking out of both sides of her mouth. All right. Because remember, it was like pulling teeth just to get her to say the word a genocide. I know. Even though, hey, listen, I did bring up the thesaurus because there's plenty of other words to use in case she didn't want to use genocide, but it's okay. It's okay. So this video is from like a 30. I got a couple of clips. Overall, the full length of the video is like 36 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. Try not to punch your screen too much. Because notice how AOC hedges to say the Israeli government, not Israel, and uses qualifying words like inherently and necessarily. See, AOC is going to be given some word salads on how all you people, can be better allies. Don't punch your screen. Please don't.
Conversation today, and welcome. I'm incredibly excited for us to be doing this. In a minute, we're going to be hearing from two of the foremost experts from some of the most foremost experts in the country in fighting anti-Semitism in America. And before we get to that panel, though, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, and most importantly, why we're doing it now. Anti-Semitism, hate, and violence against Jews because of their identity is real, and it is dangerous. It is also important to say here in this moment and during that conversation that criticism of the Israeli government is not inherently anti-Semitic, and criticism of Zionism is not automatically anti-Semitic. That being true does not mean that we should not recognize when criticism and when that criticism crosses a line into real harms against our Jewish community.
So this has to deal with all the protests that we've been seeing and how corporate media has been trying to smear it as being anti-Semitic, even though there have been a lot of, Jewish groups for peace calling for ceasefire at these protests, be it at the streets or at these universities, or calling out these politicians. I mean, the way corporate media and those who have been defending Israel, the way they've been describing it, it's almost as though the Third Reich rose from the dead, zombie Nazis, and they're goose-stepping all over the world. Goodness gracious, what are we going to do? So she brings on these two guests. Hold on, folks. Don't punch your screen too much. It gets worse. It gets a lot worse. But again, here's where she has on. Hold on, I want to pull up this portion of the tweet right here, where AOC introduces Amy Spitlick, who is the CEO of the JCPA, a lobbying group. More about that. Don't worry, we'll get to it. To talk about the supposed anti-Semitism on the left. So apparently there's a lot of anti-Semitism on the left because I guess a lot of people's feelings are getting hurt for the fact that everyone's calling out the war crimes that are happening in Gaza. Because after all, men, women, and children are dying. They're starving. The number as it stands right now is 37,000 dead. But let's be real here. The number is probably a lot higher. No cookies for Gaza, though, right? No cookies for Gaza. So let's go ahead and play this video. Brace yourself, folks. Try not to get too angry. I don't want you to be hurt too much.
Or cabals as stand-ins for Jews. And it's used ultimately to target not just Jews, but so many other communities to advance dehumanizing policies and to ultimately undercut our democracy, as we'll talk about. What's harder for us as progressives to recognize or understand is when anti-Semitism shows up and is normalized in our own spaces. And I want to be frank here. There is very real anti-Semitism that is in fact showing up in progressive spaces right now. And it's deeply painful and hurtful to Jews. As has been said, criticism of Israel, Israeli policies and its government, it's not inherently anti-Semitic. And the majority of people, students and others showing up to protest are there to speak out for Palestinian rights, not because they intend to be anti-Semitic. But we've seen the line into direct harm against Jews repeatedly crossed in recent months. And over the last 8 months, in certain ways, for me, it's been almost more personally painful to see what's happening in my own progressive community than, for example, what I saw in Charlottesville, because it's happening in my own community. We're seeing this manifest in a number of ways. Some of the obvious ways, or I hope obvious ways: celebration or denial of the October 7th attack.
No one is denying, no one is celebrating. Okay, everyone right now, especially with the aftermath of this war, all what it's going to be doing is laying the foundations for the next conflict. What people are right now doing is that they are trying to say to our politicians, to our political elite, hey, stop the killing, call for a ceasefire. The whole international community, people are asking their leaders to do so, but our leaders are indifferent. And comparing these protests to what happened in Charleston, two different things altogether, two different events altogether. But this is how, again, you see people like AOC who come in to tell people to calm down and stop protesting. And why? Because these protesters, the uncommitted votes, are scaring the Democrats. So the Democrats have to dust off AOC to tell everyone, hey, everybody, let's listen to everybody. Let's have a conversation here. And it's important to have conversations, but see the nefarious actions that's being taken place here. AOC is being brought up because it's abundantly clear that the Democrats are losing their young voting base. They're losing progressives. They're losing everybody. And as I've covered on this show, the uncommitted vote earned about 30 to 36 delegates for the DNC convention. That's more so than Fat Tony, a.k.a. Cenk Uygur, Dean Phillips, and even crystal ball warrior herself, Marianne Williamson. So they got to bring out AOC. And I guess AOC must have thought that this was a good idea, speaking out of both sides of her mouth. So trust me on it, folks, when I say it. These politicians, especially those in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, don't have your best interests at heart. Debate me on it.
Which, as I said, was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Celebration or embrace of Hamas as a terrorist organization, labeling their actions creative resistance, chanting things like, we want another October 7th. Eliminationist rhetoric, calling for Israel or Israelis or Jews to be wiped off the face of the earth. Targeting Jews or Jewish institutions here for the actions of the Israeli government. My own synagogue was targeted in the fall. And I particularly want to take a minute to unpack one major way this is manifesting, because the term Zionist and Zionism is so deeply confusing and so often gets muddied in the public conversation. No two Jewish Americans have the same relationship with Israel. Some have no relationship, but the vast majority of Jewish Americans, about 90% according to recent polls, do have a relationship with Israel, do believe that Israel should exist, that Jews should have a homeland and a place that is deeply tied with our history as a people, even if we fundamentally disagree with the Israeli government and its policies. And so to me and the vast majority of American Jews, that's what Zionism is, despite how muddied the word has gotten in the public conversation. It's a belief that there should be a Jewish homeland. And for me,
yeah, okay. But then you also have to go down and, remove people from their homes and farms like what you see in the West Bank. You have to turn all of Gaza into moonscape. I mean, all the universities and schools at this point in Gaza are gone. It can be confirmed. Everybody can confirm it. These universities and schools, community centers, marketplaces, residential homes, places of worship, destroyed, bombed out of existence.
That goes hand in hand with Palestinian self-determination, two states side by side.
Stop with the two-state. Netanyahu said that ain't going to happen. Everybody says two-state. No, that ain't happening, okay? Just like that scene from, what was it? Not The Bachelor, what was it? Wedding. No. Okay, the movie's slipping my mind, but it was where they lost their friend. The Hangover. There we go. The Hangover, where they lost their friend. They're supposed to take him to a wedding, and of course, the one of the ladies says, "Well, hey, listen, you've got to get him here quick." And the guy says, "Yeah, that ain't happening. Two-state solution? Yeah, that ain't happening."
And so, not all anti-Zionism is inherently anti-Semitic, but a litmus test for Jews, 90% of whom have a relationship with Israel, that says you have to leave that relationship at the door if you want to come into these coalitions. That is. And we see it in calls to ban or boycott Zionists, like these lists of Jewish authors or artists that are making the round. We're seeing it during Pride Month, where in certain spaces, Jews have been told they can't show up as their full Jewish selves. We're seeing it in calls to ban Jewish.
Who is saying this? Who's coming out there in full mass? Because yes, there are bad actors on both sides, on the left and the right. You have your extremists, people who just are so puritanical, it's insane. No one is preventing anybody from doing anything in this country. You have the right for free speech, and there's a right for protesting. What this is right here in these videos that I'm playing, and I'm so sorry that I have to put you guys through it. What these videos are saying is, everybody, stop making us feel bad and talking about the genocide that's happening in Gaza. Don't make me feel uncomfortable.
Organizations like Hillels from campuses. Even this weekend, and it's one of its most horrific forms, chants like we saw in DC of, quote, kill another Zionist. Frankly, we saw it in some of the responses to this event. The people who are calling me and Stacy, Zionist scum, not a human, evil and shouldn't live, simply because we're here to have a conversation about anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. And so when we use this term Zionist as a pejorative, when we use it to call for bans, boycotts, the elimination, it's ultimately calling for the vast majority of Jewish Americans to be banned or boycotted and eliminated. And that is effectively a form of anti-Semitism. And what that does is ultimately divide Jews from the very coalitions, the very spaces we all need to be in right now.
Remember when AOC in 2018 was like free Palestine and all that other stuff? Remember all that stuff she used to say? That quote from The Dark Knight, 2008, still stands to this very day. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
And I think the point that you make too about the muddying of this term and how so many people have they engage in different definitions of this term, utilizing it in different ways, and that then creates an opening in a spectrum here.
Exactly.
Yes. Hold on. Listen, I know many of you are right now hurting. Maybe you broke your cell phone or you punched your laptop. I'm so sorry. But there's more. I'm sorry. There's more, because there's the talk about being excluded now. The excluded. And AOC doesn't even push back. Let's go ahead and pull up this video here.
Conversation, we see how anti-Semitism is used to divide Jews from the very communities, the very
now this is from the final part of the video that we played.
Pro-democracy coalitions we need to be in solidarity with right now. If our communities are pit against one another, if the vast majority of American Jews are being told they're unwelcome in progressive spaces because we have a connection to Israel or a relationship with Israel, that doesn't just make Jews isolated, unsafe, it makes all of us unsafe, and we'll never be able to come together to advance the sort of inclusive future we need. Ultimately, our safety is inextricably linked and bound up with one another's and with our democracy. And so as anti-Semitism is normalized in all of these ways,
no one is normalizing it. Jesus Christ, AOC, say something. Oh, wait, she never was who she said she was. Anybody still holding out that audacity for hope? Well, keep on holding, okay? Keep on holding.
Politics and our media and all of these spaces we've been talking about, it continues to threaten all communities' rights and safety and undercut our democracy. And so too, in sort of a constant feedback loop, as democracy erodes, it creates the conditions for anti-Semitism to further flourish. It's this feedback loop, back and forth. And so if we don't bridge this divide, if we don't ensure that Jews are welcome in progressive spaces and coalitions, if we make sure that we're not letting our communities be pit against one another, we're not allowing this deeply painful moment to fracture the very coalitions we need more than ever, we don't take on these increasingly dangerous and deadly and normalized conspiracies, we're going to ultimately lose our democracy here.
I always talk about losing our democracy. We don't have a democracy. We live in a... Okay, here's what the United States is. We are technically a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Though we do preach democratic values, that's about it. But in theory, in true practice, we are actually an oligarchy, okay? The sociopaths and the billionaires bought our dear sweet republic. And if you dare say anything that triggers anybody, boy, oh boy, do you get censored right away.
So at the core of that fight is this recognition.
Thank you, Amy. It's very well said. And I also think it's important, it's a good moment to highlight the words of Deborah Lipstadt here, which is that anti-Semitism.
Oh, God. I'm sorry. There's more. There's more, just a little bit more. There's a little bit more. So, folks, hang on. Brace yourself. Try not to get too angry because we got a few more videos, just 2 more. We're going to sit through them. But this is how devastating this live stream was and how it shows the true hypocrisy of AOC. What this is an attempt by AOC, and this video is for her and her presence to try and make people feel comfortable and try not to be doing these vocal protests anymore, to maybe police the protests. This is a way to tell people to calm down, just like how Bernie Sanders, you know, sheepdogged us all the way back to the Democratic Party. This is what AOC is trying to do with the protesters. I mean, they'll show up for a photo op, but they won't be there when the police start cracking down on the protesters. They're not going to be there. Plus, as I said before, Biden is losing support. And the very fact that uncommitted, the word uncommitted, secured 30 delegates for the DNC convention that's going to be coming up here in Chicago, the Democrats are panicking. So they got to bring out AOC. They have to bring her out. Let's play this video.
Your identity. Now, Stacey, to follow up on what you were talking about, how can someone starkly oppose the actions of the Netanyahu government while also avoiding anti-Semitism?
Simple. I don't like genocide, and I despise the Zionist government in Israel that's committing war crimes. There, that's all you got to say, okay? Netanyahu's government is shite. I'll say it again one more time. It's Netanyahu's government. You just call out Zionism. You call out the genocide that's happening there. Simple.
Look, if we want to be problem solvers, we have to be able to have respectful, evidence-based conversations that are
evidence-based,
are totally free of identity-based biases. And if you make a judgment or an accusation about Israel that I think is wrong or unfair, I want to challenge you on the merits. I want to challenge your argument on the merits. And I think we can have those conversations. So Israel is a country like ours. It's subject to criticism and protest.
Bull. Look what's happening to TikTok. TikTok is at risk of being removed here from the United States. They got a couple of months or maybe till the end of this year to really do something so they can still remain, because they're fighting the ruling that our fantastic lawmakers did, because the controversial imagery from Gaza went viral all over TikTok and Twitter and over all the other social media platforms. I mean, there's no denying it. There's no denying it whatsoever, what's happening in that region. You criticize it, you're a bad person. I mean, how many times have we seen people's careers or shows get canceled because, they were critical of Israel?
And tough language that may hurt my ears that people use to hold it accountable.
Oh, my ears.
And the parameters around that should be, how would we speak about this country, right? Political protest and criticism are the essence of democracy. And we also need to take care with that expression because we need it for our democracy. I want to just mention a couple of pain points in this moment, because if we can understand the harm some words do to other people, we can.
Some words are violent. Just like when AOC said to Jimmy Dore about forced to vote, this is violence. A tweet, this is violence. These words are violent. Everything that I'm saying right now is violent. Violent, violent, violent. Anything that all of you people are typing, okay, is violent. Your words are violence. Your emojis are violence.
Be attentive to preventing it. And that's a great beginning that will matter to a lot of people. So I talked about the conspiracy frame. And so whenever we hear about nefarious control behind world events, or now we're talking about the conflict, evil control of government policy by Jewish billionaires or Zionist donors, those are just like the George Soros accusations that Amy described, this evil puppet master, trying to save democracy and support causes he cares about. So if
yes, but it is interesting to note that AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobby groups are buying off our politicians, and it's quite clear that our politicians are controlled by them, because let's face it, the donors will always supersede the voters. You think you have a seat at the table? No, it's the people who give money to these politicians. And yet even corporate media was shocked. I can't believe, hold on. You want to see acting? Here's acting. I just can't believe that our politicians are being bought by pro-Israeli groups. A foreign government is interfering with our elections. And even Jamal Bowman himself said that AIPAC is writing the bills and legislation for our fantastic congressmen and women to write. Let's go. I played the rest of this video.
If your criticism of Israel is trafficking and stereotypes, you're really in the bigotry zone. I mean, stereotypes kill. That's how the Nazis got the German people to live with this so-called final solution. So we do the work all the time to avoid words that correlate with negative stereotypes. And we need to do that here. Second, empathy and care and inclusion cannot be limited only to Jews who reject Zionism. To me, those are part of my community, friends and colleagues, and progressive Jewish groups are doing more good work than ever fighting anti-Semitism. But still, excluding Jews who believe there should...
Excuse me, but there's a lot of progressive groups standing in solidarity with some of these Palestinian protesters who want the end of the genocide, okay? It's the actions of the Netanyahu government. Netanyahu has made it abundantly clear what he wants to do in Gaza. He's made it very clear that he's going to continue on with military operations in the city of Rafah. So many journalists and, hey, first aid workers, humanitarian relief workers, dying. By whom? Well, by the shellings and the bombings by the IDF.
Be a Jewish homeland is excluding most Jews for whom it's just a feature of their identity. And that's in our civil rights legal system and our civil society, it's discrimination. And there's a zone in which we don't agree exactly the nature of the overlap between anti-Jewish hate and anti-Israel criticism. We don't have the exact identical frame to characterize it, and Jews disagree on some of these finer points, but we all agree that it's harmful. So let's just call it like eliminationist. Whatever the intent, we're all reading 20.
I got to give a shout out to one of my people in Rumble, and I'm so sorry, folks, but if I had to sit through it, then so do you. To the power of the Knights. Kit, I can't believe you're doing this to us. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll make it up to you. We got some great content as well. We got some fun stories to talk about. I promise. We're almost there. We're almost there at the end, because why not save the best for last? Because you know something, folks? You need to find out when AOC asks this important question for you all to know. AOC asked Amy how to be an ally. Oh, how can I be an ally to the Jewish people in this moment? And Amy's response that the line has been crossed in too many cases that cause harm to Jews at the protests since October 7th, that Palestinians won't be safe if Israel's not safe, and says that allies must call, yes, that's right, allies must call for the release of the hostages and the other policy changes people would like to see, that allies have to be against October 7th. That's right. And listen, I'm just reading the words. You don't have to believe me. You could hear it for yourself. I know. Please don't unsubscribe. Because if I had to sit through this, then so will you. I'm so sorry.
One showing up at these protests, speaking out against the war in Gaza with a broad brush, it makes it that much harder to effectively call out real anti-Semitism, and instead it just seeks to divide us. At the same time, as we've talked about here, we've seen the line crossed in too many cases in ways that cause direct harm to Jews, and that ultimately threatens all of us. And so for me, the guiding principle for all of this work is to understand that no one's going anywhere. Jews, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans here in the United States, Israelis and Palestinians in the region, all of our futures are inextricably bound up with one another. And in fact, the only future in which I'm safe as a Jewish American woman is one in which my Arab American, Muslim, Black, immigrant, LGBTQ neighbors are safe. And
just shut up and don't talk about Israel and the war crimes happening. Don't talk about the cringe TikToks that even the IDF was posting on their social media sites. Don't talk about the uncomfortable images of men, women, and children starving to death or being bombed. Don't talk about what happened to the World Central Kitchen Aid workers, what happened to them. Don't talk about the journalists that have been popped in the head. Don't talk about, all the crimes that are taking place. Don't talk about it, but still be a good ally. God, I hate that tone of talking. Let's be a good ally. Let's be a good ally.
Vice versa. And so too is the only future in which Israel and the Israeli people are truly safe and finally secure, one in which Palestinian children and all people are finally safe and free. And so that requires us to do the hard work to understand how, in disagreeing over policies and protesting vehemently, we don't cross that line into harm, into eliminationist rhetoric, into anti-Semitism, and that we also not allow legitimate concerns and fears about anti-Semitism to be exploited to advance a broader extremist agenda that seeks to pit our communities against one another and undermine our fundamental democracy and our liberal values.
And I mean, that's so well said. And I think it also cuts to a different skill that we have, which is allyship. And that this isn't just like a term that is used in some saccharine way, but that it is a discipline and a practice. I am a woman of color. You are a Jewish woman. Our destinies are bound up. Our protection is bound up in one another. And it's so important that we stand up and defend each other. So, Amy, to you, what does allyship look like to you in this moment? And
hey, no such thing as a wrong answer. I'll even ask all of you, and I'll even do it in AOC kind of tone. And JBP says they have perfected toxic compassion. Toxic compassion has been perfected. No, hold on, better yet. The toxification of compassion has been perfected. Folks, what does the definition of allyship mean to you? No such thing as a wrong answer. How can allies be good allies? This is a word question, and there's no such thing as a wrong answer. You get extra credit. How can you at home or at work be a better ally?
And what are the stakes for our democracy in that allyship right now?
Look, there's so much that is complicated about this, but for me, this part shouldn't be complicated, right? Being an ally to the Jewish community right now doesn't mean that we're asking you to put an Israeli flag on your front door or support every action of the Israeli government. It means recognizing the very real Jewish pain and grief that our community is experiencing following the deadliest day for our people since the Holocaust. Pain and grief that we're still in because there are hostages that remain, because the war is ongoing. It means calling for the hostages to be released alongside the other policy changes that you want to see, recognizing that what happened on October 7th was heinous and unacceptable, even as you also oppose Israel's actions in Gaza or the Netanyahu government, or believe that this war needs to end. And so too does the Jewish community need to lean into allyship.
Okay. So listen. We are not going to sit through any more of that. But there is a consequence and action for all of this, because the thing is, when you have a conversation, especially when you're trying to do both sides, you're diluting and ignoring what's essentially happening in Gaza. And this has been going on for decades upon decades. And the aftermath of this war has only led the foundation for the next war. People are not going to forget. And the death toll is far, far higher than we really know. All the people still buried under the rubble. We don't know where the hostages are all at. And any attempt to save the hostages, there was 4 hostages saved, was about like what, 200 people, 100 plus people dying because of it. The action happening there. But also even corporate media weighs in on this, because AOC knows all too well about how the media works. Because Fox Business decided covering AOC saying anti-Semitism is undermining the progressive movement. Shout out to Case Study QB. Listen, buddy, I don't know how you sit through this stuff. You're made out of stronger stuff than me. But hold on. This is a perfect way to end this segment, and should be the great reveal about how weak and ineffective AOC, or as I call her, AOC. Let's play it.
New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says the progressive movement is being undermined by anti-Semitism. Not sure how that works. Ashley, undermined? Tell me more. Yeah. Good morning. AOC says anti-Semitism is a violation of American values. She also says criticism of the Israeli government is not inherently anti-Semitic, but only when it doesn't cross a line. Watch this.
Criticism of the Israeli government is not inherently anti-Semitic, and criticism of Zionism is not automatically anti-Semitic. That being true does not mean that we should not recognize when criticism and when that criticism crosses a line into real harm against our Jewish community. Anti-Semitism is an assault on our values as Americans and especially as progressives. When the Jewish community is threatened, the progressive movement is undermined.
Yeah, interesting. Meantime, by the way, a new survey shows that a majority of Jews support President Biden and say they trust him over former President Trump to combat rising anti-Semitism. According to a poll by the American Jewish Committee, 61% say they would support Joe Biden, 23% say they would support Donald Trump. Also, by the way, 55% say Biden would be better at combating anti-Semitism in the U.S. compared to 20% who say Trump would.
And yet both will jump up and down for their AIPAC masters. It's true, you know.
Be better. Interesting, Stu.
But the proportion of Jews voting for Trump is much higher this time around, if that poll is accurate, than in 2020.
That's true.
He's got a bigger slice of the Jewish vote. Ashley, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. So what can we learn? That whole conversation that AOC did was a misdirection to keep progressives divided, to keep progressives against each other, to have us at each other's throats so that nothing can be done. Because AOC has to come in here and quickly police people on the left, or even on the right too. Because you can't dare criticize Israel or the Israeli government because that'd be anti-Semitic. Do you think AOC is a serious person? She isn't. Whoever she portrayed herself to be way early on during her first campaign in 2018 was nothing but a lie. A very good act, by the way. Many of these politicians missed out on their true calling to become actors in Hollywood, but because Hollywood and Washington, D.C. are both cesspools in which lying is the name of the game, don't expect your politician or any representative or senator to have your best interest at heart. It's pretty pathetic, and there was a lot more to that live stream, but I don't want to put you guys through it. You've been through enough. You've been tortured enough. But this has to be made abundantly clear. Do not waste your time and energy in the Democratic Party. And before anyone types, well, wait, that's helping out the Republicans. No, it isn't. People need to break away from both parties because both parties, as we have covered on the show, are owned and regulated by AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobby groups because, you guessed it, they got AIPAC babysitters. I'm wondering if AOC has an AIPAC babysitter as well. You never know. But why do a video like this unless you're trying to tell people to calm down? After all, we are in June, then comes July, and then comes August. And what happens in August? Between the 19th and 22nd, the DNC convention will be here in Chicago. And there's a lot of protesters, especially those on the left, that have been critical and voicing out their concerns and, yes, condemning the Democratic Party. The only thing the Democrats can do is bring out their old heavyweights like Bernie or AOC to try and calm people down, to trick you into being complacent. Don't be complacent.